Good evening. Welcome. I'm really glad tonight to have this talk with Xiaolu Guo. We met first 3 or 4 years ago. It was for another documentary you made, and we had already at that time another debate, of course, more political debate with a famous Chinese philosopher, Wang Hui. You told me that yesterday, just remembered me. And Xiaolu is a Chinese-British author. That's a question. I mean, it's self definition she gives of herself. Chinese-British. That's something we will discuss later. What it means. She was born in the 17th in Zhejiang province. It's not far from Shanghai. It's close to Taiwan, on the other side of the strait. She was born in she told me yesterday, in a very, very poor village, remote areas. And then she moved to Beijing, where she spent a few years. And then she moved to Europe, where she is now for quite a long time. And she became a kind of European, actually. She spent a year in Berlin, a year in Paris, and many years in London, and where she became very famous by his writings. She wrote many different novels, short stories. Some of them had won some awards, were nominated. And the last book, I Am China, maybe you have seen it already, was just released. And at the same time, as a contemporary artist, she's a creator, not only of writing, but a filmmaker, as I said. And she was awarded in 2009 in Locarno the Golden Leopard for first apparition, first success. And that was for a Chinese long story of a young woman. Maybe you can say a few words later. I wonder, maybe if I may start with the first question, just to start the discussion. As I said, you come from Zhejiang, you lived in Beijing and then in Europe. And most of your characters in short stories, novels, documentaries and movies are young women, that's most of them, I would say, that are in between two worlds, countryside and big city, China versus Europe, old economy, new economy, and there is always this tension between two different worlds. And actually my first question is, where is your home today? How do you feel? Where do you feel at home right now?
Yeah. First, thank you. Everyone's here, and it's my first time in this house, Maison de Rousseau, although it's my 10th time maybe in Geneva. So, je suis désolée parce que je parlais pas français. So I just don't want to be too silly to speak French. Otherwise, I would. So I want to speak a little bit better. So I use English. Excuse me. Home. So where's home? I never had a home. I think the most depressing thing is when I was at home in my little province when I was young, in a fishing village, because that's a home. I was born on the illiterate grandparents in a very violent fishing village, and I hated it to death. So the idea of a home is the place you have to leave, otherwise you will be totally fucked. So, and I think a character like me, you might find familiar from your daughter or your son or yourself. Is some kind of village youth, desperate, want to go to the cultural center, go to the big place, try to be Andy Warhol or whatever you call it, try to run away from very heavy tradition. So now I become 40 years old, and I just given birth to a small baby, and I think that was a change, a small change. Like I felt I'm at home in London, in the place where I had this small baby, which now she's 2 years old. But I refuse to say, if a woman has to give birth to feel home, then that's wrong, because that's just bullshit, So my problem is, I think home for me is something I always want to expand, to explore. So right now I live in London. I felt a bit home. Before that, I was living in Berlin and Hamburg, because I was making film with German filmmakers. And I felt I like Berlin, but I didn't feel home. And before that, I was living in Paris for a year and a half for the residence in Paris for the Cannes Film Festival. I thought I would remain in Paris, but I didn't. I didn't have a wonderful relationship, I think, with Paris then. So right now, I'm here in Geneva for 2 days. I want to make home here because everyone's so friendly. They took me to the restaurant every day, so yes, I want to be here. So, it's such an abstract situation.
If I can go a little bit further on this question of, because it's whole mean the identity in the same time. So, what is then your identity? Do you feel more like Chinese first, British second, or this is a world identity?
Yeah.
This is very complex. Do you consider yourself primarily like Chinese still, or British?
This is a central question. When anyone interviews me, the first or the second question will be this, because for them it's very important, and for me it should be important. It was important for me for the last 30 years. It was a nearly tragic problem for me to find out where I belong. And for the last several years, after I lived in Berlin and London, I felt I no longer been bothered by the identity. So, if you love Milan Kundera, for example, you know his sentence. If you're a writer like Milan Kundera, your political identity is the language you're writing. So he should be a Czechoslovakia writer. He should write in Czech, but he writes in French. He lives in Paris. So what's his identity? So his identity is no longer Czech, but not really French, and he went beyond. So I say that because I was bothered, like, I am Chinese writer or not, And I said, who give a damn if I'm Chinese or Swiss or Mongolian or Mongol or Eskimo? I am an Eskimo writer. So I say that because I said the national identity cannot define an artist, and the national identity cannot define anybody in this world. So maybe you are Swiss, but maybe your parents from Italy or German, or your grandparents from Greek, or your grandmother from, say, whatever, Australia doesn't exist, say, from American or Japan, because we are only human beings. And it's great if you can live beyond all these identities, because I suffer so much from writing, because my cultural identity I think, is French, because all the literatures I love is French 50s. French 40s, Boris Vian, Marguerite Duras, Jean Genet, Sartre, Natalia Sahu, I read in English, in Chinese, repeated reading. So I think my literature identity is French. My cinema identity is Pasolini, is Italian. So I'm French-Italian, but I'm a Hui minority Chinese. So my blood is Chinese, but my cultural identity is European. And each time I say that with a certain anger, because people not let me to possess all this identity.
But then, the further question is, you write in English. That means the language carries some values and a mental framework, and you don't think somehow in the same way you would do as if you would write in Chinese or in French. If you feel like more French, this French literature identity. So what does it mean to write in English?
Yeah, this is really complex. First I say, I write Chinese books, 10 books before I left China. So I left China when I was nearly 30 years old. And in Beijing, I published 10 books. Some are novels, some are short story collections, some are essays, mainly essays. So I was a prose writer in Chinese. I left China. I was 30 years old. My character is already, but I think it's built. I was no longer naive. I was no longer 18 years old, a little girl. So I came to Europe, I came to London, I went to Paris, lived in Berlin. I decided I wanted to use the language where I was living, which was London, to exercise if I can continue live a writer overseas, but not returning to my native language. So I did the exercise. So this is the book I wrote in English, the first book in English, but it's my 11th book. So a concise Chinese-English dictionary for lovers. I decided to use my very bad broken English to write a novel about a Chinese peasant woman, couldn't speak English at all, living in miserable North London, poverty. Every day she will learn the new words and try to communicate with her lover who is English gay. So this is a book I decided to write. And I said, it should be broken. And I tell you, I never went to language school in my life. And I never speak English before I came to the West. So I was 30 years old, very old, for a writer to write a second language. I said, I will try that. If it doesn't work, I will write in Chinese. I will go back to China. So I started this book in English, and then I said, oh, I know which book is my inspiration. Again, I went back to French literature. It's Roland Barthes' Lover's Discourse. Lover's Discourse? Well, okay. So I loved that book when I was in China. And that was the inspiration, because he analyzed two lovers speak, and when they say, I love you, but I don't miss you. And he analyzed what does it mean between lovers. It's a lie, it's a jealousy, it's a cheat. I said, this is so great, so great. So I steal the idea of that book, and I made this novel. And it's about a communist peasant Chinese girl couldn't understand the Western freedom, homosexuality, and individuality. And of course, it's a story of the separation. It's broken love. So that was first book, and the publisher read the manuscript, said, "No, you are crazy. You crazy? You are in Shakespeare's country. We not publish it." So I spent 2 years to make it better, to make a sentence has grammar, And then 2 years later, the book became much more clean. It reads like English. And then I sent again. They said, "Yeah, this would work. We can guess. What do you mean? We can guess." They published, and it was bestseller. I said, "Okay, wow." So that was beginning. Yeah. Maybe I will try to read a little bit. Yeah. So it's interesting because you would have French translation. In the beginning, I said this book I refused to be translated because it's about broken English. It's not about broken French. But every country said, "No, we want to buy the foreign rights."
It was translated in 26 different languages.
I think now it's like 29 languages because it's very small language, like Vietnamese, they all bought the rights. So this book is in every broken language now. And I was told the French translation was excellent because they invented a different mistake, to present. So I don't know, I tried to read, and I was worried that maybe, my French would be even worse after that, So the novel starts from the girl with very naive tone left China. And if you know Chinese language, we don't have tense, which means we don't have verb change. So in English or in French, you will say, "I have been to the cinema yesterday. I did this, I ate that." But in Chinese, nothing. I go to cinema, I eat this, and then if you want to know when, you have to put the time and the place exactly in front of the sentence. You have to say, "Yesterday afternoon, 2015, in the cinema, I go. And that's a Chinese grammar without any change of the verb. And we don't have the change of gender, sex. Especially in German, a table, is neutral. And this is a man or woman in German. In Chinese, never change. So it's very simple grammar, But the writing is, of course, very complicated. So the beginning of the novel is no verb change. So it goes like this. I just do very, very short reading. Alien. Oh, every section starts like a dictionary, a little vocabulary. Alien is adjective. It means foreigner. It means from another world. It means being from another world as a noun. Oh, it's unbelievable. I arrive in London, Heathrow Airport. Everything named very confusing, very remembering, because it's not London Airport, simply we call Beijing Airport. Everything very confusing way here. And the passengers separating in two queues, and a sign in front of queue says alien and non-alien. So I am alien, like that Hollywood film Alien. I live in another planet with very funny looking and a strange language. I stand in the most lonely and lonely queue with all the other aliens waiting for the visa check-in. I feel criminal, but I do nothing wrong. How could I do here? My English so bad. In my textbook, I studied back in China. It says, English people speak like this. How are you? I'm very well, how are you? I'm very well, how are you? So the answer and the question is exactly the same. Now, old saying in China, we say, 鸟有鸟语, 兽有兽语. It means birds have their bird language, beasts have their beast talk. English, they're totally another species. So something like that. But I promise you, later the English become perfect. Because it's about also her learning experience. She become, learn from Oxford dictionary, something like that.
And this book, it was translated into Chinese.
Yeah. So when the Chinese publisher want to buy, I said first, there's too much sex in it. It's gonna be banned anyway. Don't publish.
For China, mainland China.
Mainland China. Second, I said, it's about Chinese girl come to London, speak broken English. It's not about Chinese girl in Beijing speaking broken Chinese. So don't translate. And they said, no, we have to translate. So I said, you can translate. If you publish the original text on the left and Chinese translation on the right, so it look like a real dictionary. And they said, okay. And they published, but really big. It becomes real dictionary. And it's unfair for the translator because you look at the translation, you say, I only read the left side. I would. But they did publish, and all the sex in the book is remained, which is amazing.
Your last book, I Am China, wasn't translated into Chinese so far. You said you haven't found any publisher. So,
no, I don't want to find it.
And you don't want, because you simply think it couldn't be published in China today. Can you tell us why?
Yeah. This is in English. I wrote in English, and now it's translated in German, Swedish, Danish, Italian, Polish, but it's not in French. So I hope you will help. So it's a book about exile, and it's about two Chinese lovers. They separated from 1989 Tiananmen student movement from that square. So the man become very political, and he's a rock and roll musician. So he's a bit like a Sex Pistol Johnny Rotten character, like angry, rage against the machine. So he left China. He went alone in Europe. And his life slightly resembled me, because he lived in East London and exile, and then went to Paris, and went to Germany, and went around everywhere, Greece, tried to find where he could belong, because he no longer could return to China. And then it's about this lover who's in China waiting for him. And she's a poet, but she believes life should be beyond political struggle. And she believes ideological struggle is a trivial matter. Life is bigger than that. So she's the one, in a way, it's kind of the voice supporting the very angry character in the front page. And of course, it can't be published in China. Obvious. And I don't want to be published in China. For me, it doesn't matter. I wrote in English, and then it's done.
Well, what specifically make you think it cannot be published? You said, of course, but you have different different authors, even Moyen's, some of his books are quite critical on an ideological level, politics, and if you talk about cultural revolution, what specifically would be problematic? It's 1989 that this is still taboo in China today.
Oh, it's about. I think if you have eat with them or not. I never say no. I don't come to a dinner. Sorry, I don't have time. But anyway, it's a joke. I think for the older generation, like the Nobel Prize winner Mo Yan, he's a state writer, but he's a great writer. Really, he deserves the prize. But that generation, their books are very, very provocative, very political. But that generation, the metaphors they're using, China understand, and Chinese government understand. He would use metaphor of red soga, the rice, the pig, the killing of the animals. I would use metaphor like, how Johnny Rotten being killed by capitalism. It smells Western. It smells different. It smells like cheese. So China, we don't eat cheese. So it's the attitude. But for me, I say that it's not absolute. Nothing's absolute. One day commercialization conquer the political censorship. If they think it's very commercial, they publish it right away. So what I try to say is political censorship is nothing when it fits into the big money. Yes. We buy Africa. It's ruthless, totally. No logic.
And besides, you still live in between these two worlds in London, Beijing. You go regularly back to Beijing. You were there 2 weeks ago, you said. When did you come back? 10 days ago. And so you go back to Beijing regularly. You stay in Beijing regularly for a period of time. Which means, so you can write these books, you think they couldn't be published in China, but it's not a problem for you going back to China so far. And what does that mean? What is the state now in China for creators, especially for people like you, more provocative? There is still a space for creation in China today.
I think so. I don't know what's the situation in Russia. Maybe we shouldn't compare Russia and China. It's very tightly controlled, especially the art world. The artist is being, everyone's numbered, recorded. But again, it's a huge country. It's a very messy, chaotic, alive, vivid country, which means there's a lot of space. The grey space, the political, the top of power cannot reach, and also. It's fun, sometimes it's fun. You let people do what they do, as long as it doesn't affect the very important subject. There's a few subjects they don't want you to touch. So in a way, I think it's a contradiction. It's very tightly controlled, but there's a big space as well. And I think every year you saw excellent underground film from China, especially cinema is very strong. And you do read very strong novels from China, and you wonder, the country should be like totally controlled like North Korea. But it's not, because China has its own different dimension. And I think I wouldn't condemn the whole thing. I think there's lots of space if you know how to play.
I ask this question because sometimes when you say, okay, my book couldn't be published in China, and some books cannot be published in China. When we are here, we hear this in Switzerland, in Europe. We think, this is still very tough in China, and somehow it is. But I think it's important to say at the same time that this is a complex reality in China today. And it's true, for some people they can be arrested for what they write, but in the same time you still have this space for creation, and this is important.
I think that, this is very interesting, China as a social model, because as long as communism and capitalism coexist in China, which means everything is allowed. But there's different waves, depends which wave you will be carried in the sea, depends which tide you caught. So it's complicated. And you're a journalist, I think you know it very well,
You said you wanted to read another
we can do that.
Part of your text from I'm China, actually.
Yeah.
And can you explain how you transform one of Ginsberg's poems?
So this book is like my homage to Beat generation, because I grew up in the village, so there was very limited books, especially Western books in the Western cinema. I came to big city when I was 20 years old, so I was too old, really to know a lot. So when you were young, when you were in a village in China, any book you can get, it gives you huge influence. Because the influence is much bigger than maybe you living in New York, because you have everything. So it no longer you get stimulated so strongly. And when I was young, when I was a teenager, I read some, say Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, and even Charles Bukowski in translation. I loved it so much, because there's not much other books available. Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg is about anti-capitalism. Well, that's on the Chinese cover. Those poets and those writers born because Western capitalism is killing individuals, so they sing their own song. So I read it. Of course, it's right. Yeah, they're anti-capitalism. But anyway, I loved those books, and after that, I think my energy is like I become like a woman Kerouac in a way. I love the speed of writing and the speed of life. It was so strong in me, and I think that's the reason I think I wrote many books and write many films, because I don't believe the delay, and I believe the immediacy of the art creation, and I believe the imperfection. So I hate the perfect craftsman. Sorry, I know in Switzerland we have to be perfect to make a watch, but it doesn't matter, if you're from the third world like China. So I wanted to write a book, dedicated to those poets I really love, and one of the Allen Ginsberg poem called America, and he wrote in the 50s or 60s, and the sentence, you know very well this poem, America, I give you nothing, I give you everything, and I'm nothing now, American, and there's one sentence in that poem called, it suddenly occurs to me, I am America, me as America. And I thought that's a great line. So I want to use that line for my cover, but I want to change that word America into China. And that's why we have this title, I Am China. So in the end of the book, there's a poem, performed by this one of the lovers, it's a woman poet. And she changed this word America in the Allen Ginsberg poem into China. So every time when you hear America, she will change it to China. And here we go. I will just read the three little verses from this poem, which is a cover version of Ginsberg. And now, of course, it's called China. And see if it works, yeah? China, I have given you all, and now I'm nothing. China, $2.27. China, I can't stand my own mind, China. When will we end the human war, China? Go fuck yourself with your atom bomb, China. I don't feel good, don't bother me, China. I won't write my poem till I'm in my right mind, China. China, when will you be angelic, China? When will you take off your clothes, China? When will you look at yourself through the graveyard, China? When will you be worthy of your million Trotsky's, China? China, why are your libraries full of tears, China? When will you send your eggs to India, China? I'm sick of your insane demands, China. When can I go into the supermarket and buy what I need with my good looks, China? China, after all, it is you and I who are perfect, but not the next words. China, your machinery is too much for me. You made me want to be a saint, China. There must be some other way to settle this argument, China. Borrow is in Tangiers, and I don't think he will come back. It's sinister. Are you being sinister, or is it some form of practical joke, China? I'm trying to come to the term, China. I refuse to give up my obsession, China. China, stop pushing me. I know what I'm doing. China, the plum blossoms are falling. So this is one of the 3 verses of this very long poem by Ginsberg. I just changed the word American. And you discovered, I mean, we're in a similar situation now.
Thank you. You said that you're in a rush. You need immediacy. And, so what are you doing right now? What are you writing? What are you filming? What are you shooting?
I'm not that quick anymore because it's getting very old. Anyway, for my energy. No, but what I mean is, I'm in a rush. It's like when you were born in a very backward, very barbarian village in a province in China in the 70s. I think I had this suppression from very feudal society because I grew up with my grandparents, and my grandmother is concubine for my grandfather, and they're both illiterate. They never could write their names. They couldn't even read their name on their ID card. So I grew up with them until I was 7 or 8. I never saw my parents. So I have this depression and longing to understand, to devour the civilization, because you felt, some other people understand lots of things your same age, but you don't understand anything. So I think I have this depression, in those small, barbarian, violent village. So when I came to the little town, I was 8, and then I spent my teenager years in this town where only workers, factory workers. So my mother worked in the factory. And then my father was an artist, was a painter, but peasant painter. So it's like artisan citizen. And I think suddenly I was devouring a certain kind of civilization, which is still very, very backward. But I realized, that my enormous ignorance from living with my very barbarian grandparents in a small village. And I was furious because I want to know everything. And I remember first time, I read, of course, most of the Chinese poetry, Chinese literatures at that time, which a teenage girl would understand. But I tried to read the Western stuff because it was such an amazing, faraway place for me. And I remember the very first 2 poets I read in translation. One is an American poet, Sylvia Plath, who committed suicide. The second one is American poet Frank O'Hara. So if you know Frank O'Hara, he's a New Yorker poet, and he died in the 60s or 70s in New York. He was working in a bank or some kind of insurance company. So he's just a little Kafka, little businessman suppressed in so-called capitalist America. But he has a lunchtime, like 20 minutes, have lunchtime free. So every single poem he will write during the lunchtime. So every poem is very short. Very, simple, I passed the corner store, I saw Billie Holiday's poster, ate my sandwich. Perfect for me, because this is the only Western thing I would slightly get the sense of it. So not Shakespeare, not Jane Austen, those stuff, So it's immediate for me, the effect. And I loved it, and I remember...
But that wasn't in school, you get this...
Exactly, middle school. It's not a school.
That was in the program at the middle school.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it doesn't belong to the middle school text. It's just the reading I discovered in my father's office. So my father worked in a local town culture bureau, where they're allowed to have all this Western translation, Western kind of magazine in translation. So I had this opportunity to read those. And I remember I asked myself, in China, everyone has to love communism, love life, live for the Communist Party. But in the West, this woman called Sylvia Plath every day want to die for herself. So how does it work? I remember that, and I remember I was writing similar poems about death, and my father didn't like it. And my father said, it's all very well until the ending. When you mention the death, it's no good. And that's the difference of me and my father's generation. You know, they refuse to devalue their life, because if your life is worth death, their life has no meaning, no more value, and you cannot challenge their lifelong value. You cannot tell them you are wrong, because that means their life is zero, and it's cruel. So I think, okay, I leave. So I left my province, and I want to go very far. You know, I came from South Province, and I had the opportunities to study in Shanghai in art school, in a theater drama school, because I was very good student. You know, I like 6,000 candidates, I will be number 1 or number 2. So I got into very, very big school, but I refused to be in Shanghai just because it's close to my hometown. It's scary. I refused to see my parents. So I said, Beijing, you know, that's the furthest I can get in North China. So I left for Beijing, and I swear to myself, I will never return. And of course, I had to return, because we live in the moral world. You know.
Since you were angry when you left your village, angry against your parents, this village life, you were angry as well when you left Beijing somehow. Oh, well, you told me yesterday that you didn't like this city so much when you left it first. And are you still angry today with your parents, with Beijing, with China?
Well, I think this emotion is like a teenager emotion. You know, if you have children, you know, it's so annoying. You know, and it's a rebellion with reason, but very abstract reason, because it's a cultural baggage we Chinese youth had. The cultural baggage is like, okay, maybe if you're Swiss, maybe you don't feel, because in a way, you know, I think in Switzerland you are told you don't live with national identity, yeah. But in China, you are told, yes, you live for the national identity, being Chinese, proud of being Chinese. But for me, it's like, what is Chinese? Because you know, I'm not where my ancestors from Mongol or from Turkey, because I'm a Hui minority, you know. So the whole
maybe just to explain that
it's like Muslim.
It's a Muslim minority in China.
Yeah, but I don't do any religious practice, of course. So for me, to have such a heavy cultural baggage, you know, being Confucius, being communist, being just to study all the very old tradition is very heavy, and you can imagine why. In England, there's a punk in a way. You know, the whole Victoria tradition was so conservative, so strong. You know, and then I think it makes sense why the punk culture will happen in Germany and in England. In a way, you know, and I think maybe I am, you know, Chinese punk, but punk culture is not Chinese culture, because I think we are from peasant agriculture. You know, we are I think rooted in our agricultural emotion. So when I see the land or earth or tree, you know, I love it, and I think that is more, you know, home to me. But when you say, you know, this angry feeling is because I think my family, the whole structure in my family is so typically Chinese, because my grandparents' generation is so feudal, so rotten, and my parents' generation was so communist. It was so pure communist. It was unlivable. It was unlivable for a young person, you know. And I think in that environment, you have no other way apart from leave. But when I left Beijing for London, it was because my speed, because I wrote 10 books and I published, and I wrote maybe 200 TV soaps, because that's how I got money to live in Beijing. You know, I had my own flat, you know, I had my own, you know, money, you know. So I survived very well in Beijing by writing lots of cheap TV soaps. And I just totally got really tired. I remember I was just typing, you know, policeman chasing some little criminal, grandmother arguing with grandfather, you know, just typing away, like with my feet. One day you are exhausted, and you said, this is not my future. But with my generation, we studied in Beijing Film Academy, everybody wanted to be a film director, and I didn't. I didn't like the financial side of filmmaking. So I said I will remain as a novelist. But I felt stuck, like personal life and the creativity just stuck. And again, my cultural identity, is European identity, although my blood is Chinese, So why I'm in China pretending I write it with Margaret Duras style, or why I'm in China pretending I'm making Pasolini cinema, I may as well just go to Europe. And that was clear. I go to Europe, so I will stay in those countries and to learn about their culture. And so I did, yeah.
Maybe it's time to give the floor to the audience. Maybe you have some questions to ask Xiaolu Guo. Y a-t-il des questions?
The first one will be tough. Yeah. Yeah.
Madame?
J'aimerais savoir quand elle est venue en Europe, comment elle a survécu, est-ce qu'elle avait de l'argent, est-ce qu'elle a travaillé, comment ça s'est passé sur le plan matériel.
Yeah, yeah. So I wasn't so unlucky. Have to work in a Chinese restaurant in the basement. I wasn't, because I was someone studied very hard. So I got very good scholarship. I remember I applied 2 scholarships, one in London, one in New York, and it was a competition, and of course I got it because I was good, and but the New York one never arrived, so I wasn't chosen, I think. And when I got to the London fellowship, I said, I go. So I was in London in the National Film School. I was supposed to make documentary films in that film school, and I was supposed to go back to China after that. But my scholarship was like, because I was already a lecturer in China teaching cinema, so it's like visiting scholar, which allowed me to live and work and kind of to have a decent life for 1 year. So for that 1 year was wonderful, and after that year I already finished. I was writing, nearly finished this novel. I was writing this novel. I said, I am not going back to China if I haven't finished this book about London. And so for me the book is much more important than anything. So I said, first I have to finish this book. So I managed to extend. So the second year was very bad. I had no money, no scholarship, nothing. So I was desperate. But the second year I finished this, and I remember I went back to China to try to survive all that. But and after a year and a half, the publisher said, yes, we give you money, we're going to publish this. So then I came back, and then was really successful, the book. And then I said, okay, I stay. I will write more novels in English. But I didn't stay in England. I got another kind of fellowship, in Paris. It's like Cannes Film Ciné Fondation. So then I left London. I went to Paris to stay in the area, near Montmartre, with his residence. So I had some money to live, and then I was writing a novel called UFO in Her Eyes. Originally, I thought this is just a little exercise in English. I will still return to Chinese, to write in Chinese, I said. So in Paris, I was studying French, of course. I was studying French. So I was speaking a bit French, but I was writing a novel in Chinese because I said that would be, my mother language. But it didn't. It was very confusing because I was still in the English word, but speaking French, study French, and writing in Chinese. It's very chaotic, and I think for a writer it's painful. For living it's fun. If you are a tourist, you practice Spanish as a French. It's fun. But for a writer, it's desperate because you want to control every sentence in a beautiful way. You don't want to be so intelligent with your sentence. So I decided it doesn't work. If I speak French, study French, I should write in French. But it's impossible. I was only in France for 2 months, 3 months. I couldn't really use French at all. Then I said, I use English. At least le temps, the time, similar, Okay, manger, eat, this is different. But still, you will use 26 letters. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I know this. So I said, I write in English. So that was very kind of break, I said, actually, I can write in English in France, which means I can write in any other language if I'm in Germany. Then 3 years later, I went to live in Germany. I studied German again. Then I said, okay, I just write in English, about China, So then I found this system, and I continued. Yeah. So.
Une autre question?
Quelle langue parle-t-elle avec sa fille de 2 ans?
My daughter?
Yes, which language do you talk with your daughter?
It's a mix of it's Chinese and English. It's mixed, but it's very difficult because in my house no one can speak Chinese, so it's very odd. I don't have much lonely time with my little baby, so it's always with people speaking English, and so another thing I found, so I'm really a bastard of language because I find it very unnatural in non-Chinese world speaking Chinese. I find it totally artificial and fake because I don't like selfish immigrant. Yeah, selfish immigrant is have your text sorted, clean text, making money, speaking your own mother tongue, never mix with other culture, and Chinese do that all the time. Every immigrant they do that. I hate that. So yes, she should speak if I'm from Mongol, she should speak Mongol language or whatever, Turkish language. But you know what? She's free. She can speak whatever language she wants. And she can hate me when she grows up. But we should embed ourselves into the society. So for me, this sounds very wrong for most people, politically incorrect. But I said, well, why not? Let me be,
And when it's Chinese, is it Chinese, regular Chinese?
Exactly.
Or dialect?
Great question. So the Mandarin we speak, Mandarin is artificial language. So if I speak Chinese, I would speak Mandarin other than my own language, which is Zhejiang dialect. So there's no such thing Chinese. As you know, China is conquered by Yuan, by Mongols in the Yuan dynasty, some 100 years ago. So where are the Mongols? Where are the Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan's children? Yeah. So the official Chinese is Beijing dialect. After 1949, the China has been taken over by communism. So the Beijingese language, as capital language, become official language, being forced to teach in the school. Okay. Now, the only language is being shared by all the Chinese amongst all the minority is written language. Now we call it Hanzi, so Han, written language. That's the only common language, which is written. Everybody in every province, like India, we speak our own dialect. So there's no such thing called the Chinese. There's one thing called the Mandarin. Is a political language. Now, I say that why I argue this is artificial language if I speak that to my children outside of China. Okay, so I am from South. I'm not from North China, which is Beijing. No, I don't speak that political language. So I'm very problematic with which language I speak. So when I was in China, I was like you because I was a journalist. Every Saturday, I write columns for 2 magazines. So my column is called "The People Lost Their Native Language." That's my column. Every Saturday, I write an essay. I said, I came from Zhejiang and Fujian. We speak Kejia and Zhejiang dialect. I lost my language because I write in Beijingese language and I write with Beijing kind of street slang because that's cool. That's the top one. Why? Where's my culture? So I'm totally suspicious about the so-called great national tradition in heritage. No. It's a counterculture, totally counterculture. Our language is being totally rewritten by the power. So we should speak whatever. We should speak monkey language. We should be like Swiss, speak all kinds of language. Wonderful, wonderful. I wish I could speak more than 3-4 languages. Yeah.
Everything is political, we used to say in China. And actually, when I listen to you, I understand that everything you say is a kind of political statement.
Yeah, I think because I'm allergic. I'm allergic with certain easy political correctness. I'm totally allergic. And I will argue. I said, when you talk about Chinese, you mean what? You mean what? So I'm totally like, I'm just standing outside. And some people will think, but most people, they will say, it is about. I said, if you're so quick to answer, I'm sure it's wrong. Well,
Can you say a few words about your film on the side of the filmmaking? If the language is an issue or not at all, because it's about images.
Great,
and on the other side, how your films are distributed around the world, if it's easier for you to get shown in Europe or...
Yeah. I think this is where the cinema has such a great instant power. Because it's really difficult. So, like with book, you have to study English or French to read, and you have to have a luxury to have loneliness, have 2 weeks loneliness. I mean, imagine if you have children, a family to raise. You couldn't even have 1 hour to read a 3-page. I can't, because the baby is crying on the floor, and you can't read it. So it's such a luxury. You can read books nowadays still, And I always blame, I was very cruel to people never read my books. And I said, why you don't read my books? And they said, well, do you have time to read? I said, not much recently. So they don't need to read because they need to have life. So I don't have life, so I read. Therefore, making films so wonderful. Okay, I have to go out back for money. I have to lie, say why you have to give me money to make film. This is important. But I spent maybe 2 years make a film, but immediately everyone can see it downstairs within 1 hour or longest 2 hours. In 2 hours, you see the whole culture, landscape, debate, and you can watch 3 films a night, which I do, and you learn so much. Of course, most stuff are commercial, very TV based, but still, it's excellent cinema. You can get great education from that, and a pleasure, and a beauty, Of course, it's different. Reading books, the emotional engagement with the conscious, with words, is very different from the visual language. But again, we live in a totally informative age, in my case, I think I'm lucky because I studied the film, cinema, for 12 years, shamelessly. Because I always studied film. I remember when I was 18, I said, first I leave this province. Second, I will study the most modern art format. So my father was a painter. My father said, yeah, painting. I said, you kidding? Painting? It's dead or long ago. And so he said, so you love, because I was writing a lot when I was a teenager. So he said, well, then you will study literature, of course. I said, literature? It's not modern. It's oldest one. And then, of course, cinema, that's, I think, in the early 1990s or 1980s, cinema was so magical. Not like now, everyone have a video camera, you can make film. At that time, cinema was so incredible, beautiful, So I said, of course, I will be a filmmaker. And so that was clear. So I went to Beijing Film Academy. Although I passed drama school, all the theater, I would become dramatist. But I decided between drama and the cinema, I would study cinema. So I stayed in the film school, BA, MA, post-MA, become lecturer, and then came to the UK. Ended up in the London Film School again, I wanted to know cinema. So I was trained as filmmaker. So in a way, it's kind of easier for me to make film because I know the language. So I have the basic confidence. So I never had the confidence to write a novel, but all my life I spent writing, not making much films, really, because writing is natural. You have a pen, you have a computer, you write. Every time wake up, you can write. You don't need any money or that, and it's very soothing. So it's like it's a very natural habit. But cinema is something like very attractive, instant. Beyond the language difference. It's really great. And also, I think they are totally different media. So I normally don't make film from my book at all, because I think the book should be the voice very internal, and it's a psycho language. But cinema is a visual language, so they don't belong to each other. But there's one book I wrote called UFO in Her Eyes, which is I made into film, because I write that book in order to make film. And I realized if I try to make film, I would spend 3 years to find this money, because I need like €1 million to make that film. I said, 3 years. I will already publish as a novel, and then I will find more money with a novel format. So I wrote as a novel. And I worked with that film, yeah.
Il y avait une autre question.
La dernière question.
Oui, une autre main se levée. Allez-y.
Well, thank you for all your information. It's really quite amazing. I've got two questions. The first one would be, is this your frustration and how you started your life, which made you really willing to do something for your life? That's the first question. And the second would be, how do you see China evolving? It's moving a lot. There is still a space of creation or creativity because not everything is structured at the moment. But how is this going to evolve in the future? Do you have any idea about the perspectives to come?
Anyway, yeah. Second question is impossible to answer, but I will try. So first question, frustration or desperation. One thing I think we all learn is, okay, everyone can be artist, but to be persistent, passionate. Well, I think I am passionate, but I hate this cliche. Yeah? To be a good artist, you cannot build that your work and your life, your art, from only frustration or say ego. Yeah. So even Andy Warhol, he's the most egoistic modern artist, but with ego you cannot become a good artist, I think, because you have to have absolute love to the art as a form and as a language. Without that, no one will finish a good book. No one. Because to write a good book or to make a strong film it demands so much. It demands you amoral, for example. Yeah. So this is nothing to do with frustration. My first novel called The Village of Stone. It's about the village I grew up, and it's also about the modern city of Beijing, how postmodern, cool, young people, their life, It's very autobiographical. It's like you said, all my novels is centered around women, young women, Very, very autobiographical, but it's not because I wanted to tell my story, It's the sorrow I had when seeing the old peasants dying. I saw my grandparents dying in a terrible situation. Yeah, one is committing suicide, another one dying from violence, and how the village lived. I cry. There's one great film, Soviet film called So Cuba, meaning I am Cuba, and it's a Soviet communist filmmaker went to Cuba, made an epic film about Cuba before the colonization, after colonization, after the revolution. It's an amazing film. I watched that film. I said, I love so much. I love those peasants, the sugarcane peasants in Cuba. I hate those colonists. I love people want to become, to control their own life rather than let other people control. That energy in the film was so beautiful and strong. It made me want to write a book. So that is nothing to do with frustration or self-therapy. So I think to be a good artist is like you're so crazy. You think your baby is not important because you think this film is so amazing. Cry, I don't care. So it's this madness. It's absolutely madness. It's like I'm not those mad artists. I'm very proper. In a way. Compared with Vincent van Gogh, for example. But it's absolute that craziness. Really. And I just don't believe. Only those kind of emotion would make you a good artist. And I'm not good. Because I don't think I'm on the bottom of the reality, because the emotion you have in your body is so much, you build from your life and you made aesthetic from it, and you know the language of the literature and the cinema. It's a skill in a way. It's a big skill. Yeah. And the second question, of course, it's impossible. I'm just going to answer very lazily. China, okay. I refuse to answer very simple because it shouldn't be Western propaganda, especially American propaganda, say, oh, it's a monster, xenophobic reaction towards China because China has come to buy everything. And it shouldn't be a Chinese propaganda, it's China is great, we are shaping the greatest history, save the world. No, because China is its own unique model, its own unique monster, with its beauty and grotesque nature. Because China was a bit like Soviet before 1989, but Soviet collapsed, become different union state, and then those states returned to the Christianity, become Orthodox. So religious power is very strong now in the post-Soviet, but China didn't do that. So the government continued to survive and quite well, quite strongly, and we don't have any religious background. So people cannot withdraw to a place they can find a spiritual surrender. So that's quite unique with Chinese model. Then we thought China is doing the European or American model, which is capitalistic model, open market. But it's not, because ideological control is so strong that it's overridden the open policy. Even the Deng Xiaoping age, it's very carefully planned. There's a little spot to have those economy. But the majority of China is still socialist economy. And then now, with this new president, actually the control is really strong. So there's a great contradiction how the communism policy as ideology and the capitalistic economy coexist. This is great contradiction, and it's impossible. They shouldn't coexist. But they did wonderfully coexist in China now. And don't you think that's an amazing model to study, to understand, rather than to judge quickly? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Une dernière question, ou est-ce qu'on est arrivé au bout?
Dernière chance, quelqu'un veut s'exprimer?
Well, if it's not the case,
We have wine together? Yeah.
Just stay open for me, please, the question.
Yeah, talk to me when you have wine. I'm sure you have questions.
Well, thank you so much, Xiaolu, for sharing your vision of China and your work with us. That was just wonderful. And thank you, Frédéric Koller, for. I didn't say that at first, but you've been living in China for a while, and you wrote a few essays also about China, and it was great for us to hear you put some light on what also Xiaolu was saying. So thank you so much. Two more things. We of course will have a glass of wine just now in a few minutes. We're also selling Xiaolu Guo's books in French and in English. So and I'm sure she'll be happy to sign the copies for you. And also tomorrow at lunchtime we'll show some free screenings of She, a Chinese, one of your most popular movies, who won also a few prizes, including at the Locarno Festival. And at 3 o'clock we'll have, that's your latest, right? Late at night, Tales from a Proletarian, so 3 o'clock. It's some free screenings in one of the little room we have downstairs. So I think there are some seats left. Last thing, Xiaolu is also in Geneva for this great Human Rights Films Festival. It's starting tomorrow. It will last the whole of next week. And they have dozens of amazing movies, so I really encourage you also to watch, as many as you can. And thank you all for being here tonight. And I hope